The alarm clock buzzed softly on the nightstand, but he was already awake. He hadn't really slept much that night. His mind was busy, running through all the questions and answers he had practiced over and over. Today was supposed to be the day everything changed. He lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, feeling that heavy mix of nerves and hope twisting in his stomach. In the small apartment, the air was cool, and the early morning light barely touched the curtains. He sat up slowly, careful not to wake his little girl, who was curled up in bed next to him. She had kicked off her blanket in her sleep, her tiny hands resting near her face, her hair messy from the night. He smiled softly, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. That smile carried both love and worry. She was his reason for everything. He got up quietly and tiptoed into the kitchen. The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. The floor was cold under his feet, and as he moved around, he tried not to think too much about the bills stacked neatly in a pile on the counter. He opened the cupboard and reached for the last box of cereal, shaking it gently to see if there was enough for breakfast. It wasn't much, but it would do for now. The day had to start strong. He poured the cereal into a bowl, then poured milk into another small cup for his daughter. He took a deep breath and reminded himself, just get through today. Today wasn't just another day of endless applications and rejection emails. Today was an actual interview, a real chance to land a job that could change everything for both of them. He looked at the clock. There was time to get himself ready before waking her. He moved into the bedroom and pulled out his best clothes, the only suit he owned. It wasn't new, but it was clean. He had ironed it the night before, carefully smoothing out the wrinkles, wanting to look professional, confident, put together. He dressed slowly, adjusting the tie twice before it felt right. Then he stood in front of the mirror, studying himself. There were dark circles under his eyes from long nights and stress, but he tried to smile anyway. He practiced a few lines again. I'm hardworking, reliable, and motivated. He whispered the words softly, imagining himself in the meeting room, shaking hands, getting that nod of approval. A small spark of hope lit up inside him. Maybe this time, someone would see past the struggle. Maybe this time, someone would give him a chance. Once he was ready, he gently woke his daughter. She blinked up at him with sleepy eyes, rubbing her face. Daddy, she murmured softly. He smiled and kissed her forehead. Morning, sweetheart. Come on, let's get some breakfast. She climbed out of bed and padded to the table, her tiny feet making soft sounds against the floor. As she ate, he knelt down beside her, fixing the straps of her little backpack. She would be spending the day at a friend's house while he went to his interview. She chattered quietly about her favorite cartoon, and he listened, nodding, even though his mind was half on the clock, counting down the minutes until they had to leave. When breakfast was done, he cleaned up quickly, grabbed his folder with his resume inside, and checked his phone for directions. He had planned everything carefully, leaving early so nothing could go wrong. He couldn't afford to be late. They stepped outside, and the cool morning air brushed against his face. He held her hand as they walked down the street, his heart pounding with nerves. The bus arrived on time, and they climbed aboard, settling near the back. She rested her head against his arm, humming softly as the city moved past them. He stared out the window, watching the buildings go by, imagining himself working in an office, earning enough to finally give her the childhood she deserved. When they reached the friend's house, he knelt down again, hugging her tightly. Be good, okay? She nodded with a little smile, and he handed her over to the kind neighbor who had offered to watch her for the day. He waved as she ran inside, and then he turned and started walking quickly toward the bus stop again. Every step felt heavy, but determined. He thought about all the nights he'd stayed up searching for jobs online, all the times he'd been turned down, all the interviews that never came. This one felt like his shot at turning things around. He had studied every detail about the company, memorized answers to common questions, and even looked up advice on how to sit, how to shake hands, how to sound confident even when you're scared. The morning traffic roared around him as he reached the bus stop. He checked his watch, reassured himself he was still early, and took a deep breath. He tried to calm the storm of nerves in his chest by thinking of his daughter's smile. This wasn't just about a paycheck. This was about building a future for her. The bus arrived, and he climbed aboard, finding a seat near the front this time. He sat quietly, holding the folder on his lap like it was something precious. The city streets blurred past as he imagined walking into that office, greeting the people there, and impressing them with his dedication. He pictured calling his daughter later that day to tell her, "Daddy got the job." That thought alone made him smile. When the bus stopped near the tall glass buildings downtown, he stepped off and adjusted his tie. The sun had risen higher now, and the streets were buzzing with people in business clothes, hurrying to work. He joined the flow of people, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement as he made his way toward the company building. Every detail stood out to him. The smell of coffee drifting from a cafe nearby, the sound of traffic honking in the distance, the chatter of strangers on their phones. His heart beat faster with every step. He glanced at his watch again. He was right on time, maybe even a few minutes early. He felt a small wave of relief. As he walked, he whispered one more prayer under his breath. He wasn't a man of many words, but he needed this. He needed someone to see how hard he was trying. This wasn't just about him. It was about the little girl who trusted him completely, who believed her dad could do anything. He couldn't let her down. He reached into his pocket and touched the small photograph of her that he always carried. Her smile gave him strength, reminded him why he was here. He straightened his shoulders, tightened his grip on the folder, and took another deep breath. He didn't know it yet, but the next few minutes would change everything. His life was about to take a turn he never saw coming, all because of one unexpected decision. The city streets were alive with movement that morning. People rushed past him, holding coffee cups, adjusting ties, talking quickly into phones, as if every second mattered. He blended into the crowd, walking with purpose, the soft thump of his shoes echoing faintly on the wet pavement. The rain from earlier had left the sidewalks slick, glistening under the growing sunlight. He tightened his grip on the folder under his arm, the edges already worn from being handled so carefully. He turned a corner and checked his watch again. There was still time. Not much, but enough. His heart was beating fast, a mix of nerves and determination pushing him forward. Today had to go right. He'd promised himself this was the start of a better life. No more scraping by, no more wondering how to pay rent or whether he'd have enough to get groceries for the week. This job could change everything. As he hurried down a quieter street, something caught his attention. A faint, frustrated sound, like someone muttering under their breath, and then the sharp squeak of tires skidding slightly. He turned his head and saw a car stalled in the middle of the road, hazard lights flashing. A woman in a business suit stood near the driver's side, her phone pressed to her ear, her other hand gripping the steering wheel as she tried to push the car off the road. He slowed his steps. She looked panicked, glancing back and forth between her car and the oncoming traffic. Drivers were honking as they swerved around her, some shouting as they passed. The car wasn't moving at all. He hesitated, just for a moment, torn between helping and hurrying on his way. He looked at his watch again. If he stopped, even for a few minutes, he risked everything. The interview was across town, and being late might ruin his one shot. But then he saw her face. Her expression wasn't just frustration, it was fear. She looked alone, stranded in the middle of that busy street, and no one else was stopping to help. Something inside him wouldn't let him just keep walking. He knew what it felt like to be stuck, to have no one step in when you needed it most. He couldn't turn away. He jogged over, slipping a little on the wet pavement. "Are you okay?" he called out, his voice cutting through the sound of honking horns. She turned toward him, relief washing over her face. "No," she said quickly, "it won't start, and I can't get it out of the way." "Put it in neutral," he said, moving around to the back of the car. She looked at him for a second, startled, and then nodded, climbing inside to shift the gear. He planted his hands firmly against the trunk, braced his feet, and started to push. The car was heavier than he expected, and the wet street made it harder to get traction, but he pushed with everything he had. Slowly, the car began to roll forward. "Turn the wheel," he called, and she steered as he guided the car toward the curb. His suit jacket was damp now, his shoes slipping slightly with every step, but he didn't stop. After a few long moments, the car was finally out of traffic, safely at the side of the road. He exhaled heavily, wiping sweat and rain from his forehead, his heart pounding from the effort. She stepped out of the car and looked at him with wide eyes. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I didn't know what to do." She reached into her bag as if looking for something to give him, but he shook his head. "It's fine. I'm just glad you're safe." She pulled out a sleek business card and held it out to him. "Please take this. You didn't have to stop, but you did. I'd like to repay you somehow." He glanced at the card but didn't take it. He was already late. He could feel time slipping through his fingers. "No need," he said, giving her a polite smile. "Take care of yourself." And with that, he turned and started walking quickly down the street again, his shoes splashing through puddles as he went. He checked his watch and felt his stomach sink. He was already behind schedule. His heart pounded harder, and he picked up his pace, nearly jogging now. Every step felt heavier, his mind racing. He'd done the right thing. He knew he had. But now he couldn't stop thinking about the interview. What if this ruined everything? What if this was another setback, another mischance? The city seemed louder now, the rush of cars and chatter of strangers filling his ears as he ran. His tie flapped against his chest, and the folder under his arm felt like it weighed 10 pounds. He weaved through crowds, apologized quickly when he bumped into someone, and kept glancing at his watch as if time might somehow slow down if he willed it. By the time he reached the building, his chest was tight, and his breathing was heavy. He hurried to the front desk, smoothing his jacket, trying to compose himself. I have an interview," he said, giving his name. The receptionist gave him an apologetic smile. "I'm so sorry, sir. They've already started. Your slot was 15 minutes ago." His heart sank. He tried to explain, tried to ask if there was any way they could still see him, but the answer was gentle yet firm. The interviews had moved on, and his chance was gone. He stood there for a moment, frozen, trying to hold himself together. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice low, and turned to leave. The walk back out of the building felt like moving through a fog. The busy streets blurred around him. People hurried past, laughing, talking, rushing to their own lives, while he felt like he was standing still. The rain had started again, light but steady, and he didn't bother to pull up his collar or cover his head. He just walked, his thoughts heavy, his chest tight with disappointment. He thought about how hard he'd prepared, how much he'd hoped this would be his break. All that effort, all that planning, and it had slipped away because he stopped to help a stranger. He tried to remind himself he'd done the right thing, but it didn't feel like it. It felt like another door closing, another setback he couldn't afford. By the time he got back to the bus stop, his clothes were damp, and his tie felt like a noose around his neck. He loosened it and sank onto a bench, staring down at his shoes. He thought about his daughter, about how excited she'd be to hear about his big day, and a lump formed in his throat. How was he going to tell her? The bus arrived, and he climbed aboard, slumping into a seat at the back. The folder with his resume felt useless now. He rested his forehead against the window and watched the raindrops race each other down the glass. He didn't notice the stranger he'd helped drive by in a taxi moments later, glancing out the window and spotting him in the bus. She stared for a moment, thoughtful, before making a quiet decision that would change both of their lives. The apartment was quiet when he stepped inside later that day. He closed the door softly behind him, leaning against it for a moment, letting the silence settle around him. The air smelled faintly of laundry detergent and the toast he'd made for breakfast that morning. He hung his jacket on the back of a chair and loosened his tie, feeling drained. Every muscle in his body ached, not from physical work, but from the weight of disappointment pressing down on him. He moved into the small living room and sat on the worn couch, burying his face in his hands. The sound of laughter floated faintly through the thin walls from a neighbor's apartment. Outside, a car horn blared in the distance, followed by the hum of passing traffic. Life was going on all around him, but for him, it felt like everything had just stopped. He thought about the look on the receptionist's face when she told him he was too late. She'd been kind, but there was nothing she could do. He'd stood there for a moment, hoping waiting for someone to change their mind and give him a chance. But no one had. And now, sitting on his couch, he felt like he'd failed. He reached over and picked up the photo of his daughter from the table. Her bright smile filled the frame, her 2 missing front teeth showing proudly. He smiled faintly at the picture, but his heart ached. He had promised her that things would get better soon, that Daddy was going to find a good job, and everything would be okay. Now he wondered if she'd lose faith in him. The sound of tiny footsteps snapped him out of his thoughts. She came running into the living room, her arms open wide. "Daddy," she squealed, leaping onto his lap. He hugged her tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "Hey, sweetheart," he whispered, forcing a smile. "How was it?" she asked eagerly, her big eyes looking up at him. "Did you get the job?" His chest tightened. He wanted so badly to tell her yes. He wanted to see her little face light up with joy. But lying to her felt worse than the truth. He stroked her hair gently and said, "Not this time, baby. They didn't pick me." Her smile faded, but she didn't cry. Instead, she hugged him tighter. "That's okay," she said softly. "You'll get one soon. I know you will." Her faith in him was both comforting and heartbreaking. He held her close, fighting back the tears that burned in his eyes. "Thank you, sweetheart," he murmured, kissing her forehead. "I'll keep trying." They spent the rest of the evening together, playing a simple board game and watching her favorite cartoon. He tried his best to stay cheerful, laughing at her silly jokes and letting her win the game twice in a row. But even as he smiled, a heavy feeling lingered in his chest. When she finally fell asleep that night, curled up in her blanket with her stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm, he sat at the kitchen table in the dim light. The bills were still there, stacked neatly, waiting for him. He picked them up and flipped through them one by one. Rent, electricity, groceries. All of it added up to more than he had in his bank account. He leaned back in his chair and rubbed his face. The weight of responsibility felt heavier than ever. He wanted to do more for her. He wanted to give her the world. But right now, he felt like he was barely holding things together. His phone buzzed on the table, startling him. He reached for it quickly, hoping it was some kind of opportunity, maybe a follow-up call from another company. But it was just a message from a friend checking in. He stared at the screen for a moment before setting it back down. Sleep didn't come easily that night. He lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the day. The decision to help that woman haunted him. He didn't regret helping her. He couldn't regret doing the right thing. But part of him couldn't help wondering, what if I'd just walked past her? Would I have made it on time? Would I have finally gotten the job I'd been dreaming of? The thoughts swirled in his mind, leaving him restless. Around midnight, he got out of bed and went to the window. The street below was quiet now, lit only by a few flickering streetlights. He leaned against the windowsill, arms crossed, and tried to breathe deeply, tried to convince himself tomorrow would be better. The next morning came too soon. His daughter woke him up by climbing onto his bed, her soft giggle filling the room. He forced a smile and got up, making breakfast as the sun streamed weakly through the window. He had no interviews lined up for the day, no plans except sending out more resumes and hoping someone would give him a chance. After breakfast, he sat at the kitchen table again, laptop open, searching for job listings. He sent out applications to every company that seemed even remotely possible, tailoring each cover letter, attaching his resume, and saying silent prayers with every click of the submit button. Hours passed like this, the sound of his daughter playing in the living room in the background. By evening, he felt drained again. Another day of trying, of hoping, with no guarantees. He stood at the window once more, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He didn't notice the sleek black car that slowed as it passed his building, or the woman inside glancing up at the apartments with a thoughtful expression. The following day began much the same. He woke early, got his daughter ready, and started his job hunt routine. He was typing out another application when his phone rang. The number on the screen wasn't familiar. He hesitated for a moment, debating whether to answer. "Hello," he said cautiously, holding the phone to his ear. A calm, confident voice replied, "Is this Mr. Taylor?" "Yes, speaking." "This is Evelyn Carter," the woman said. Her voice was warm, steady, and professional. "I'm the one you helped yesterday. My car broke down on Main Street." Recognition hit him immediately. He straightened in his chair. "Oh, hi. I'm glad you got home safely." She chuckled softly. "I did, thanks to you. I haven't been able to stop thinking about your kindness. You didn't even take my card." He cleared his throat. "You're welcome. I'm just glad I was there to help." There was a pause on the other end. Then her tone shifted slightly. "Listen, I'd like to talk to you about something. Would you have time to come to my office tomorrow morning? I think I may have an opportunity for you." His heart skipped a beat. "An opportunity?" he repeated, unsure if he'd heard her correctly. "Yes," she said simply. "I'd like to meet with you. I'll send you the details." He hung up the phone in a daze, staring at the screen. His daughter peeked around the corner, curious. "Who was that, Daddy?" He smiled softly, still trying to process what had just happened. I think someone wants to help us," he said quietly. That night, he lay awake again, but this time, the weight on his chest felt different. Lighter. There was a spark of hope, something he hadn't felt in a long time. He had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in months, he was looking forward to finding out. The morning sun filtered softly through the curtains, casting a pale golden glow across the apartment. He stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie with nervous hands. It was the same suit he had worn to the interview he never made it to. He smoothed the fabric down, trying to ignore the faint creases that no amount of ironing could hide. His reflection looked tired, but there was something new in his eyes, a flicker of hope, cautious but real. His daughter sat at the kitchen table, swinging her legs as she ate her cereal. She watched him quietly, as if sensing this day was different. "Are you going to work today?" she asked, her little voice filled with curiosity. "Not work," he said with a smile, kneeling beside her to straighten her hair. "I'm going to meet someone. Remember the lady I helped the other day? She called me. She wants to talk." Her eyes lit up. "Maybe she'll give you a job," she said, her voice full of innocence and belief. He chuckled softly, kissing her forehead. "Maybe," he whispered. Her faith in him was a reminder of why he had to stay strong, even when life kept knocking him down. After dropping her off with the neighbor again, he boarded the bus into the city. The ride felt longer than usual, every stop dragging out the anticipation. He stared out the window, the reflection of tall buildings and busy streets blurring past. His mind was a storm of questions. Why would this woman call him? What kind of opportunity could she offer? He'd looked at her car that day, noticed its sleek design, and the tailored clothes she wore. She didn't seem like someone struggling. Maybe she was important. Maybe this was his chance. The bus stopped in front of a towering building made of glass and steel. It looked expensive, the kind of place he never imagined himself walking into. He stepped off the bus and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, staring up at the building as people in sharp suits streamed in and out of the revolving doors. His palms were damp. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and walked toward the entrance. Inside, the lobby was bright and polished. The air smelled faintly of coffee and fresh flowers. A receptionist greeted him with a professional smile. "Good morning. How can I help you?" He cleared his throat nervously. I'm here to see Ms. Carter. She asked me to come." The receptionist checked her screen, then nodded. "Yes, she's expecting you. Take the elevator to the 20th floor." His heart pounded as he stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, and soft music played as the numbers lit up one by one. He stared at his reflection in the shiny metal, adjusting his tie again, trying to calm himself. He felt out of place, like a kid sneaking into a world that wasn't his. When the elevator doors opened, he stepped out onto a floor that felt even more luxurious than the lobby. The carpet was thick, the walls lined with art. A woman in a sleek dress approached him with a warm smile. "Mr. Taylor?" she asked. "Yes," he said softly. "Right this way," she said, leading him down a hallway to a large office with floor-to-ceiling windows. The city skyline stretched out behind the desk, sunlight pouring in. Sitting behind the desk was the woman he had helped that rainy morning. She was dressed sharply in a navy blue suit, her posture confident, but her eyes kind. "Mr. Taylor," she said, standing to shake his hand. "It's good to see you again." "Good to see you too," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "Please have a seat," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her. He sat carefully, clutching his folder in his lap, unsure what to do with his hands. "I wanted to thank you again," she began. "That day, you had no reason to stop. Everyone else passed me by, but you helped. You risked your time, your plans, to make sure I was safe. That says a lot about your character." He shifted in his seat, feeling both humbled and nervous. I couldn't just leave you there," he said softly. She smiled. "Most people would have. But you didn't. And I believe in rewarding people who go above and beyond." She leaned forward slightly. "I'm the CEO of this company. I run over 300 employees, multiple departments. Every day, I meet people with impressive resumes, Ivy League degrees, and polished confidence. But do you know what I rarely see? Heart. Real, genuine heart. You showed me that." He blinked, unsure what to say. I appreciate that," he murmured. She opened a folder on her desk and slid a paper toward him. "I'd like to offer you a position here. It won't be glamorous at first, but it's stable, it pays well, and it has room for growth. More than anything, I want someone like you in this company. Someone who knows what it means to put others first." He stared at the paper, his breath catching in his throat. "Are you serious?" "Completely," she said with a warm smile. "This isn't charity, Mr. Taylor. I'm not giving you this because I feel sorry for you. I'm giving you this because you earned my respect, and I believe you'll earn everyone else's too." His hands trembled slightly as he picked up the paper. The numbers on it made his eyes widen. It wasn't just a job. It was security, a steady paycheck, a way out of the endless cycle of worry. I don't know what to say," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "Say yes," she said gently. He looked up at her, his throat tight. "Yes. Yes, I'd love to," he said, his voice cracking slightly. She stood and extended her hand again. "Welcome to the team, Mr. Taylor." He shook her hand, feeling a mixture of relief and disbelief wash over him. It felt like a dream, one he might wake up from at any moment. As he left her office, escorted by another staff member, he couldn't stop smiling. The elevator ride down felt surreal. People bustled around him, carrying files, talking on phones, but he barely noticed. His thoughts were already on his daughter, imagining the look on her face when he told her the news. He stepped outside into the sunlight, the city buzzing with energy. But this time, he didn't feel like just another face in the crowd. He felt like a man who had finally caught a break, a man whose one act of kindness had changed his entire life. On the bus ride home, he sat by the window, staring out at the passing streets with a quiet smile. The weight he'd been carrying for so long felt lighter. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel hopeless. He felt free. When he reached his stop, he practically jogged to the neighbor's house, eager to see his daughter. She ran into his arms, laughing, and he held her tightly, tears stinging his eyes. "Daddy got a job," he whispered in her ear, his voice shaking. "A really good job." She pulled back, her little face lighting up like the sun. "I knew you would," she said proudly. And in that moment, he knew everything had been worth it, the struggle, the disappointment, even missing that interview. Because stopping to help a stranger hadn't cost him his future. It had given him one. The first morning of his new job felt like waking up in a completely different world. The alarm buzzed softly, but this time he didn't dread it. He slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake his daughter, and stepped into the small kitchen. The apartment was still the same worn countertops, the same squeaky chair at the table, the same bills neatly stacked on the counter. But something in the air felt lighter. Hope had found its way in, soft and steady, filling every corner of the space. He brewed coffee and stared at his freshly pressed shirt hanging on the back of a chair. His hands trembled a little as he buttoned it, not from fear, but from anticipation. For so long, he had woken up each day with uncertainty pressing down on him. Today, for the first time in years, he had somewhere to go. Somewhere he was wanted. His daughter stirred awake, her sleepy eyes peeking out from under her blanket. She sat up and smiled at him. "You look nice, Daddy," she said, her voice soft and full of pride. He smiled back, kneeling to hug her. "Thanks, sweetheart. Today's the big day," he whispered. "Do you get your own desk?" she asked, curious. "Maybe," he said with a small laugh. "We'll see." He dropped her off at school with a kiss on the forehead, then made his way into the city. The bus ride felt different now. He wasn't just another tired face commuting with nowhere to go. He had a purpose. He found himself sitting up straighter, noticing things he hadn't before, the way the sunlight hit the tops of the buildings, the cheerful hum of people heading to work, the smell of fresh pastries drifting from a bakery they passed. Life looked brighter somehow. When he arrived at the office, he hesitated outside the towering building for a moment, taking it all in. The glass reflected the morning sun, and people in sharp suits streamed in through the revolving doors. He adjusted his tie and took a deep breath, then walked inside. The lobby was as impressive as he remembered, with polished floors and the faint scent of flowers in the air. The receptionist smiled warmly when she saw him. "Good morning, Mr. Taylor. Welcome aboard," she said, handing him a visitor badge for his first day. He thanked her and followed the HR coordinator through a maze of hallways and elevators. They gave him a quick tour, the break room with its shiny coffee machines, the open office filled with rows of sleek desks, the conference rooms with walls of glass. Everything felt so far from the world he'd come from. He was introduced to his team, a small group of friendly people who welcomed him with smiles. They didn't seem to care about his worn suit or his humble background. They shook his hand and asked about his day, making him feel like he belonged. His new workspace wasn't fancy, just a desk with a computer, a chair, and a small potted plant someone had placed there to greet him. But to him, it felt like a dream. He sat down slowly, running his hand along the smooth desk surface, his heart swelling with gratitude. He was no longer sending out desperate applications or worrying about eviction notices. He was here, working, earning, and finally building a future for his daughter. The morning passed quickly as he dove into his training. He paid attention to every detail, scribbling notes, determined to prove himself. There was so much to learn, but he didn't feel overwhelmed. He felt hungry for it. Around midday, he was called into a private office. Evelyn sat behind her desk, her posture relaxed but commanding. She gestured for him to sit. "How's your first day so far?" she asked warmly. He smiled, still a little nervous in her presence. "It's amazing," he said honestly. "I'm so grateful for this opportunity." Her expression softened. "I knew I made the right decision," she said. "I don't just hire based on skill. I hire based on character. People like you are rare, Mr. Taylor. You didn't even know who I was that day, but you helped me anyway." He lowered his gaze, feeling humbled. "It just felt like the right thing to do," he murmured. "And that's exactly the kind of person I want leading this company one day," she said with a smile. His head shot up in surprise. "Leading?" She nodded. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but good people rise. I see potential in you, and I plan to invest in it." He left her office with her words echoing in his mind. For years he'd been overlooked, rejected, treated like he wasn't enough. And now here was someone who not only gave him a chance, but believed in him, truly believed he could be something more. That night, when he came home, his daughter ran into his arms the second he opened the door. "How was it?" she asked eagerly, her big eyes shining with curiosity. He picked her up, spinning her around. "It was perfect," he said, laughing. "I have my own desk and my own computer, and guess what? There's free snacks." She giggled, clapping her hands. "Can I come see it one day?" "Absolutely," he said, kissing her cheek. They ate dinner together at the small kitchen table, but even the humble meal of rice and vegetables tasted better that night. He told her stories about the office, about the big windows that looked out over the city, about the nice people who said hello to him. She listened intently, smiling at every detail. After she went to bed, he sat in the living room, staring at the city lights outside the window. He thought about how quickly life could change. Just days ago, he'd been sitting at this same table, crushed by disappointment, wondering how he'd ever get back on his feet. Now he was employed at a company run by someone who had seen his heart and decided it was worth more than any resume. Over the next few weeks, he threw himself into his work. He stayed late, learned fast, and built a reputation as someone dependable. His colleagues noticed his dedication. Evelyn noticed too. She would often stop by his desk to check on him, offering advice and encouragement. She seemed genuinely invested in his growth, and he found himself wanting to live up to the faith she had placed in him. The paycheck started coming in, steady and reliable. For the first time in years, he could pay every bill on time. He started saving a little each month, dreaming of moving into a slightly bigger apartment where his daughter could have her own room. Even small things felt like miracles, being able to buy her new shoes without stress, surprising her with a toy she'd been wishing for, treating her to ice cream after school just because he could. One evening, as he tucked her into bed, she wrapped her little arms around his neck and whispered, "Daddy, you're a hero." The words hit him hard. He smiled, holding her close, but his eyes burned with emotion. "No, sweetheart," he whispered. "I'm just lucky." But deep down, he knew luck wasn't the only thing that had brought him here. It was a choice, a simple choice to help a stranger on a rainy day. That choice had opened a door he never thought existed. And behind that door was a future brighter than he'd ever dared to dream. Months passed, and life began to feel steady in a way he had never thought possible. The constant worry that used to sit heavy on his chest was slowly replaced by a sense of calm. Each morning, he woke up with purpose. He'd slip on a clean shirt, tie his tie, and head into the bustling city, no longer feeling like an outsider rushing past glass towers. He was part of something now. He belonged. The office became like a second home. He got used to the hum of printers, the soft clack of keyboards, and the low murmur of conversations drifting through the air. The smell of coffee in the mornings became comforting rather than a reminder of exhaustion. He had colleagues who greeted him warmly, who asked about his daughter, who made him feel seen. And every once in a while, Evelyn would stop by his desk. She wasn't the kind of boss who towered over people. She had a presence that was calm yet commanding, someone who could quiet a room with just her voice. But with him, she was always kind. She'd ask about his day, offer advice, and encourage him in ways no one else ever had. She didn't just see him as an employee. She saw him as a person with a story, someone worth investing in. One afternoon, he was in her office for a project update when she leaned back in her chair and studied him for a moment. "Do you know why I called you that day?" she asked softly. He shook his head, unsure. "Because I helped you?" "Yes," she said with a smile. "But it wasn't just that. I was in that car, stranded, frustrated, and I watched hundreds of people walk past without a second glance. You didn't. You risked your time, your chance at whatever you had planned, to help a stranger. That told me everything I needed to know about you. It's easy to find people who are skilled. It's rare to find people with true integrity. And I believe that's worth everything." Her words stayed with him long after he left her office. For so long, he'd felt invisible, like no one saw how hard he was trying. To hear someone of her stature acknowledge him, not for his resume or experience, but for his heart, was overwhelming. At home, his daughter was thriving too. With a steady paycheck, he'd been able to buy her a small desk for her room so she could draw and do her homework. He stocked the pantry with snacks she loved and filled her bookshelf with colorful stories. The dark cloud of uncertainty that had once hung over their little home had lifted. One Friday evening, after picking her up from school, he decided to surprise her with dinner at a little family restaurant. She bounced in her seat, grinning as she looked at the menu. "We're eating out?" she whispered, as if it was too good to be true. "Yep," he said with a smile, watching her excitement with warmth. Moments like this made every struggle worth it. As they ate, he found himself reflecting on how quickly life could change. Just months ago, he had been sitting on a bus, soaked in rain, clutching a useless folder full of hopes that felt like they would never come true. Now here he was, watching his daughter giggle over a plate of fries, feeling a sense of security he hadn't felt in years. When they walked home under the soft glow of streetlights, she held his hand and swung her arm playfully. "Daddy," she asked. "Yeah." "I'm glad you helped that lady," she said simply. She's like a fairy godmother." He chuckled softly. "Something like that," he said, squeezing her tiny hand. That weekend, he spent time fixing up their apartment. Small things like tightening loose screws on the kitchen chairs and hanging up drawings she'd made at school. Their home wasn't fancy, but now it felt warm, alive, full of hope. Monday morning came quickly, and with it, another surprise. As he sat at his desk working, Evelyn appeared with a folder in her hand. "Got a minute?" she asked. He nodded and followed her into her office. She gestured for him to sit, then handed him the folder. Inside was a promotion offer, a pay raise, better benefits, and a leadership role on a new project. He blinked at the numbers, his throat tightening. "I've been watching you," she said with a smile. "Your work ethic, your attitude, your willingness to learn. You've exceeded every expectation. I think you're ready for more." He looked up at her, words failing him. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," she said with a kind laugh, echoing the same words she'd used the day she hired him. He smiled through the lump in his throat. "Yes," he whispered. Walking out of her office that day, he felt like a different man. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was growing, building something real. For years, life had been an uphill battle, and now, finally, he was reaching the top of that hill. That evening, he took his daughter out for ice cream to celebrate. She sat on the bench beside him, her little legs swinging, chocolate smudged on her cheeks as she ate her cone. "You're smiling a lot, Daddy," she said with a grin. "I have a lot to smile about," he said softly, ruffling her hair. She leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. He closed his eyes for a moment, holding back tears. "I'm proud of you too, sweetheart." Life didn't become perfect overnight. There were still challenges, still long days, and bills to pay, but everything felt different now. He wasn't just scraping by anymore, he was moving forward. And every time he passed a stranger on the street, he remembered that rainy morning, that moment when he'd made a choice without thinking twice. Helping someone had cost him his dream interview, but it had given him something better than he could have imagined. A career, stability, a mentor, and a future for his daughter. Months turned into a year, and their lives blossomed. They moved into a slightly bigger apartment with a sunny room just for her. She decorated it with posters and stuffed animals, proud to finally have her own space. He bought her a bike for her birthday, and they spent weekends at the park, laughing as she learned to ride. One evening, as he stood at the window of their new home, looking out at the glowing city skyline, his phone buzzed with a message from Evelyn. "You're doing great work. Keep it up. Proud of you." He smiled, tucking the phone into his pocket. Her belief in him had changed everything. And he vowed that one day he'd do the same for someone else. He'd be the person who saw potential where others didn't. Behind him, his daughter called out, "Daddy, come read me a story." "Coming," he said, turning away from the window. He walked into her room, where she was already snuggled under her blanket, holding out a book. He sat beside her and began reading, his voice calm and steady. She listened with a smile, her eyes heavy with sleep. As he closed the book and kissed her forehead goodnight, he whispered softly, "Everything's going to be okay now, sweetheart. I promise." And this time, for the first time in years, he knew it was true.